We just did a previous video looking over all the Daredevil Born Again, like moments. Everything else was just, I guess, furthering the story. We didn't really care. Daredevil's Matt Murdock's girlfriend. She gonna be done. Like, fuck her. Paige is back. Anyways, we got this video right here. Let me look at the video and it'll give me more thoughts. Okay. Daredevil Born Again has found the perfect Punisher villain. It should be nice, man. I heard about that Daredevil's series for Punisher. I could have just said Punisher, the new Punisher show on Disney Plus, because he already had a show. When did his show come out before Daredevil's, or what was it? I mean, Daredevil had 3 seasons before Born Again, and Punisher had 2. So this would be like season 3 if they keep everything the same. I didn't even finish that shit. I watched like a few episodes of the first season. Anyway,
Marvel had made no secret of the fact that Jon Bernthal would reprise his role as Frank Castle in Daredevil Born Again's first season. Bernthal made his long-awaited return in episode 4, as the series followed up on a huge cliffhanger involving White Tiger being shot dead by a vigilante wearing the Punisher's skull. That episode answered the burning question of whether it was actually Frank who killed White Tiger, but that was just the beginning of the show's dramatic new Punisher storyline. Bernthal's character returns in the Season 1 finale, where he teams up with Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock to take on an army of corrupt NYPD officers, all proudly wearing the Punisher emblem. Frank Castle makes his stand, and he leaves no uncertainty regarding how he feels about his image being co-opted by those sworn to uphold the law.
You're a bunch of clowns, you know that?
Bernthal's return is exciting for any number of reasons, but the biggest by far is that Marvel has found a strangely perfect antagonist for Frank Castle in Born Again. Who would have thought that crooked cops, not gangsters, would be the ideal Punisher villains? It's a storyline with its roots in the real world, and it's past time Marvel got around to telling it. It's been quite a while since we've seen Bernthal's Frank Castle in the MCU. Bernthal last played the role in Season 2 of Netflix's The Punisher series, which debuted back in January 2019. All signs point to Frank Castle having stayed active in the MCU since then, targeting various criminals and gang members in New York City and earning a devoted following among members of the NYPD. That said, Frank is definitely a little worse for wear at the moment. He's disheveled and unshaven. He's living a hermetic existence in his makeshift hideout. He's seemingly addicted to painkillers. All the pain and rage that fuels the Punisher is taking its toll on Frank Castle the man. It certainly doesn't help that the Punisher has inspired a wave of copycat killings. In episode 4, Frank claims not to care much about the fact that cops are donning his emblem and taking the law into their own hands, dismissing them as fanboys. He downplays the issue and seeks to reignite his old debate with Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock about the justice system and the need to respond to the evils of the world with nothing less than lethal force. But, as much as Frank pretends not to care, it's obvious he's genuinely bothered by the idea of police officers taking up his bloody crusade. That's essentially where the series leaves Frank in episode 4. He and Matt have it out, and Matt loses his cool, leaving feeling as much disgust for himself as he does for Frank.
Goodbye, Frank.
That episode leaves us to wonder how long Frank can continue to stew in his hideout and let others co-opt the Punisher's symbol for their own ends. And, as the season finale proves, it's not very long at all before he finally snaps. Frank returns in episode 9 just in time to save a battered Matt Murdock from the wrath of Vincent D'Onofrio's Wilson Fisk. Despite literally taking a bullet for New York's recently elected mayor, Matt finds himself marked for death by Fisk's new crack team of crooked, fascist NYPD officers. Fisk reasons that a martyred hero can only further his mayoral agenda. Fisk's first big move is to shut off power to the city and turn his army loose on the looters, justifying the need for martial law. However, these militant cops don't count on their idol working against them. Frank, reluctantly called into action by Deborah Ann Wall's Karen Page, helps Matt survive a deadly shootout in his apartment, and even as the two frenemies part ways in the aftermath, Frank finally decides he can no longer abide the idea of his mission being co-opted by others. He unleashes all his pent-up fury on the police gathered in Fisk's Red Hook compound, killing several before ultimately being captured. As with many elements of the show, Born Again ends its first season on a bit of a cliffhanger where Frank Castle is concerned. We see Frank locked up in a cage alongside many of New York's billionaire elite, but he doesn't stay there for long. That finale's post-credit scene revisits Frank, who wastes no time cozying up to the guard. One savage bone-breaking later, Frank is free and ready to resume his campaign of vengeance. That scene certainly seems to be setting up Barenthal to return again in Season 2 as Daredevil rallies an entire city to fight back against Mayor Fisk's oppressive regime. But it may also be setting up Barenthal's next solo project in the MCU. We recently learned that Barenthal is set to star in a standalone Punisher special on Disney+, similar to Werewolf by Night and the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special. Barenthal is even co-writing the special alongside We Own This City director Reynaldo Marcus Green. Could this special delve even deeper into the conflict between the Punisher and the men and women who have stolen his image? We hope so, because this is a story that is long overdue and one that deserves its own spotlight in the MCU.
I did what I had to do. I let the system take care of the rest.
Oh, you and your goddamn system. You and your goddamn system.
With Born Again, Marvel is finally diving headlong into an ongoing controversy surrounding this Punisher character. The idea that police officers, as well as members of the military and various right-wing militias, are adopting the Punisher emblem is not an invention of the series, but a sadly real-world phenomenon that has persisted for years. CBR traced that phenomenon as far back as 1988's The Punisher No. 8, which included a fan letter from an active service member. The trend has only accelerated over the last decade or so, with many pointing to the late Navy SEAL Chris Kyle as having cemented the link between the Punisher and the U.S. military.
Chris Kyle is a former Navy SEAL who holds the U.S. military's all-time record for confirmed sniper kills, 150.
The author of the autobiography American Sniper, the inspiration for the 2013 film starring Bradley Cooper, Kyle was known for adorning his equipment with the Punisher emblem, and even nicknamed his unit the Punishers. He righted wrongs, he killed bad guys, he made wrongdoers fear him, Kyle wrote of Frank Castle. We spray-painted the skull logo on our Hummers and body armor and our helmets and all our guns. We spray-painted it on every building or wall we could. We wanted people to know we're here and we want to fuck with you.
And that's your company logo now?
Yes, it is my company logo. It has the crosshairs in the right eye because that's where my buddy was shot. He was shot in the right eye.
Meanwhile, members of the Milwaukee Police Department allegedly spearheaded a rogue vigilante group also dubbed the Punishers, prompting multiple internal investigations. A police department in Catlettsburg, Kentucky came under heavy criticism in 2017 for adorning police cruisers with Blue Lives Matter-themed Punisher logos. In October 2019, a Dallas police officer was seen wearing a Punisher logo during a contentious community meeting, and in 2021, Barenthal himself called out the fact that some January 6 rioters were spotted brandishing the Punisher skull. These people are misguided, lost, and afraid, Barenthal wrote on Twitter. They have nothing to do with what Frank Castle stands for or is about. Clearly, these police officers and service members and other groups idolize Frank Castle and the way he takes the law into his own hands, meting out a lethal brand of justice. That's despite the fact the Punisher was never meant to be a character worthy of emulation. He's a profoundly tragic figure, a man who lost everything and was failed by the system, driving him to become a remorseless killer. Despite what Chris Kyle wrote, Frank Castle is not a man who rights wrongs. He's the farthest thing from a hero. He simply pursues a selfish, single-minded quest to eradicate criminals, ignoring the justice system and the rule of law entirely. He's meant to be pitied rather than admired, though that hasn't always been what fans take away from Marvel's numerous Punisher comics, movies, and shows. The Punisher problem got to the point that co-creator Jerry Conway finally set out to reclaim the iconic logo for the Black Lives Matter movement in 2019. Conway launched a fundraising campaign dubbed Black Lives Matter Skulls for Justice and spoke out against those co-opting the Punisher logo for their own ends. For too long, symbols associated with the character I co-created have been co-opted by forces of oppression and to intimidate Black Americans, Conway wrote on the fundraiser site. This character and symbol was never intended as a symbol of oppression. This is a symbol of systematic failure of equal justice. It's time to claim this symbol for the cause of equal justice and Black Lives Matter. Conway's efforts only highlighted how little Marvel and Disney have done to address the growing Punisher problem over the years. It's only with Daredevil Born Again that Marvel is finally tackling this controversy in a real and high-profile way. Again, Marvel and Disney have done surprisingly little to publicly fight against the misappropriation of the Punisher logo. They certainly haven't tried to stem the flood of Punisher-themed Blue Lives Matter merchandise on the internet. Though, as CBR's Brian Cronin has pointed out, Disney may be limited in their legal options. It's hard to enforce a trademark on something as basic as a skull logo. Prior to this series, Marvel's most notable attempt to fight back against the exploitation of the Punisher logo came in 2019's The Punisher number 13. In that comic, from writer Matthew Rosenberg and artist Simon Krudansky, an injured Frank Castle is approached by two NYPD officers who reveal themselves to be rabid fans. To their surprise, Frank reacts with disgust, telling them, "We're not the same. You took an oath to uphold the law. I gave all that up a long time ago. You don't do what I do. Nobody does." That comic was certainly a start, making it clear that Frank Castle doesn't condone killing in his name, or the thought of police officers taking the law into their own hands. Frank at least has the presence of mind to know that no one should do what he does. For police to defy the system and act as judge, jury, and executioner is unforgivable. Again, the Punisher was never meant to be an aspirational figure. That said, this Punisher meta-narrative amounted to a single scene in a single issue of a much longer series. The problem is that Marvel never built from there or sought to spread Frank's message to the police to a wider audience. The Punisher number 13 sold roughly 21,000 copies upon release, a small fraction of the number of people who have watched the Netflix series or the Punisher movies. Addressing the Punisher controversy in a single comic should have been a small first step for Marvel. Instead, for years it served as the sum total of their visible efforts to fight back against the character's misuse. Marvel's approach in recent years has been more to distance itself from the Punisher entirely. The 2022 Punisher series by writer Jason Aaron and artists Jesus Saiz and Paul Azaceta basically serves as Frank Castle's swan song. In that story, Frank becomes the new leader of the ninja death cult known as the Hand. The Hand's demonic master, the Beast, even resurrects Frank's late wife Maria, a reward for his most deadly and faithful servant. But it all falls apart for Frank in the end. Maria rejects her husband after her memories are restored, utterly horrified by what he's done in the name of her and their children. The comic even takes great pains to establish Frank as someone who was plagued by violence and bloodlust from an early age. The Punisher is portrayed as a sick, sad inevitability, not the result of a decorated soldier mourning the loss of his family. Ultimately, the comic leaves Frank defeated, disgraced, and having abandoned the mantle of the Punisher. Once and for all, the series rejects any notion that Frank Castle is a noble or heroic figure. On the comic side, Marvel has effectively wiped its hands of the character, at least for the time being. But the MCU is taking a completely different approach. At long last, Marvel is tackling its Punisher problem in a clear way, and on a much wider stage than before. Marvel fans who have never picked up a comic in their lives are now seeing the danger posed by rogue police officers who have adopted the Punisher's symbol. Born Again shows a city being torn apart by vigilante violence, but not the kind decried by the newly elected Mayor Fisk. Men like Daredevil and White Tiger seek to work within the bounds of the system, using their powers to help their communities wherever possible. But even as they do, a subset of the NYPD has taken to dressing like the Punisher and working outside the scope of the law. They defy the very system they're sworn to uphold in a way that makes even Frank Castle uncomfortable. They kill in his name without authority or oversight. As we see in the finale, that's finally become too much for Frank Castle to bear. Frank is a man wholly and utterly devoted to his mission, his never-ending war. He can no longer abide the thought of others corrupting and co-opting that mission for their own ends. As Frank makes his doomed stand against an army of skull-clad NYPD officers, it becomes clear he'd rather die than tolerate their existence one day longer. If the comic book Punisher reacted to these cops with cool contempt, the MCU Punisher is racked by an almost suicidal rage. He's finally made it clear where he stands, and so has Marvel Studios. Whatever happens next with Frank Castle's story, we're just glad to see Marvel finally directly addressing its Punisher problem in an MCU project. The company has stayed mostly silent on the issue for far too long. The Punisher symbol should never be glorified, and it's imperative that message should come from Marvel itself. What do you think about this profound change in direction for Barenthal's Frank Castle? Is Marvel finally telling the Punisher story we all needed to see? And what do you think the future holds in store for the character in the MCU? Let us know in the comments, and make sure you like and subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch.